Bentrovati amici del rock and roll, bentrovati su questo canale Twitch per raccontare delle storie di eccellenza, soprattutto spirituale. Terzo episodio legato al connubio tra hardcore, musica punk hardcore e spiritualità. Oggi puntata veramente d'eccellenza, sul serio. Infatti ho chiesto la collaborazione del mio amico Dasa con House of Devarishi per avere un ospite veramente incredibile che fra poco andremo a presentare. Intanto do il benvenuto proprio a Dharma. Ben trovato.
Hare Krishna Andrea, bentrovati a tutti, è un piacere ritrovarci dopo un mese, se non sbaglio, dalla diretta precedente e sono davvero molto contento, felice che siamo riusciti a organizzare questo evento che è molto bello. Penso che sarà anche parecchio seguito, me lo auguro, anche perché Paramananda Porcell ha sempre veramente molte cose da raccontare, poi sarai tu a aggiustare il tutto, quindi siamo veramente felici. Diciamo lo staff House of Devarishi particolarmente e in più il fatto che comunque collaboriamo ancora una volta con te, quindi meglio di così.
E allora a questo punto io direi che noi facciamo il nostro passaggio linguistico dall'italiano all'inglese. Ovviamente per chi ci seguirà in seconda battuta potrà sfruttare quella che è l'opzione sottotitoli di YouTube per avere la traduzione di quello che noi andremo a raccontare. So here we go, please welcome Mr. Paramananda. Here you go.
Haribo, good to see you guys.
Haribo. Hare Krishna.
I love you. Learn the Italian. It reminds me of my grandparents.
Yeah. We can go on if you want, but I think it's better in English, right?
All right. Good. What do you want to know about?
Okay. So, Dharma, thank you so much for letting me get in touch with Paramananda. When did you first met?
The first time was in the beginning of 90s, and so it's a long time. Paramananda for me is one of my source of inspiration, like Raghunath, and so I'm really happy to see you both at the same time tonight. So I'm happy that this episode is happening tonight. It's agreed that this could be arranged. So I'm glad that Paramananda found the time and agreed to this interview because, like I said, he's not only a long-time friend, but also such an inspiring devotee and yoga teacher. And so thank you, Andrea, for having the House of Devarishi on your show. So now it's the time. Enjoy the interview and Haribo to all. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We're gonna talk to Dharma later on. Welcome. Thank you so much for your time. It's a huge pleasure for me to have you here. Like Dharma said, you're such an inspirational character in this world, and I think that especially in 2021, it's important to bring out how much important is this combination in between hardcore punk music and spirituality. So with you, we're gonna go all through the different decades of this genre and of your personal life experience, beginning with a very seminal punk hardcore band that was called Violent Children. What was it all about?
Well, I first started going to shows in Connecticut, actually, because my dad, he used to work in New York City. You know, New York City back in the 80s was like a mess. You know, it was a lot of crime, a lot of, there's a big problem with the police because a lot of the police were, getting paid off by drug dealers. Drugs, were becoming increasingly, popular and taking over, especially like the Lower East Side and Greenwich Village. And that's where all the shows were. So my dad didn't like me going to shows in New York City. So I used to go to shows in Connecticut. For some reason, he thought Connecticut was okay for a 15-year-old kid to go to. But yeah, that's how I first met Ray Capo Ruganoff, and we instantly became friends because we were both straight edge. And you know, straight edge was, it wasn't easy to find another person that was straight edge back then. You know, straight edge, the popularity of straight edge had kind of died with Minor Threat. It wasn't even really like a thing anymore. You know, straight edge was kind of like a footnote in the history of hardcore by that point. And so he was straight edge. We started hanging out. I was in a band called Young Republicans, and he was in a band called Violent Children. And after I'd known him for maybe like 6 months, both of their guitar players went to college. And so he asked me if I wanted to join the band. And I said, yeah, sure. I was friends with all those guys. So I joined Violent Children. That was our first band that we did together, but Ray didn't sing, he played drums.
Okay. But somehow you understood that Connecticut probably was in the right place to make a change.
Yeah, you know, well, we were both still in high school at that time. And, you know, so we were I actually lived in New York. I didn't live in Connecticut. I lived in Westchester, which is like the suburbs of New York City. And, you know, pretty much after we graduated, we decided that we were going to do a new band, and we wanted to make it a straight edge band, which was pretty much unheard of at that point. And so we did Youth of Today, and we started Youth of Today with the intention that we were going to move to New York because we loved all the New York bands. By this time, we were going to a lot of shows at CBGB's. You know, I started going to shows when I was 15 in Connecticut, but by the time I was like 16 or 17, I started going out to CBGB's because they had the matinees on Sundays, and they started at like, you know, sometimes it would start like as early as like 1 o'clock. And so I could just tell my dad I was going to my friend's house and take the train down to New York City and be back, you know, by Sunday night. So, you know, those matinees were super influential to us. They were super inspiring to us. So we always wanted to move to New York City to be part of that scene. So, you know, once we graduated, we moved to New York.
Musically speaking, you were saying that you love the bands from New York City. So as an inspiration, talking about your playing and talking about the songwriting, which was like the band that you felt connected the most at the time?
Well, Violent Children played a lot of shows with Agnostic Front. We were friends with Agnostic Front, so they were always super inspirational. And when we moved to New York, you know, they were a really special band because they got a lot of bad press saying that they're Nazis and they're this and they're Nazi skinheads and, you know, they're racist. But that wasn't what I saw at all. You know, when I first started, you know, seeing Agnostic Front when United Blood came out at CBGB's, you know, Roger used to say stuff on stage like, I don't care if you're a punk, I don't care if you're a skin, I don't care if you're straight edge, we're all in this together. You know, we're all kind of misfits from society, and you know, so we shouldn't fight, we should unite. And it really created a community, you know, and I really think that that's what I was looking for. I was looking for a group of like-minded people because I didn't find that in my high school. You know, in my high school, people were very materialistic. I went to a very sort of rich kid high school. You know, there's a lot of kids that, you know, her parents were very wealthy. Their parents were doctors or lawyers and things like that. And so, you know, a lot of the kids in my school had their sights on going to college, making a lot of money, and being like their parents, having a huge house in the suburbs and, you know, driving a Porsche. And I never really jived with that because I saw that even though my dad had a lot of money and he had a big house and, you know, nice cars and things like that, he wasn't happy. And so I always wanted to try to shift my life in a different direction. I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I knew that just the pursuit of money and the pursuit of, you know, whatever, having all the accoutrements that come with money, big house, I could just see that from my dad and all my friends' dads that, they weren't truly happy. So I was kind of more into finding an alternative, which is why I got into punk. And, one of the things that makes people feel connected is community. And so that New York hardcore scene, it really, at least in the early days, it really had a sense of community that, we were all just a bunch of freaks and misfits and outcasts, and, CBGB's was our home, and it was a great scene. It was a great time.
So can we say that probably the name Youth of Today was at the same time a sense of community with people that were like dealing with the same problems, like being misfits or outcasts, like you said, and at the same time a separation to what the materialistic society was like at the time?
Yeah, it caused problems because we were so outspoken about, like, not drinking, not doing drugs, being positive, not being negative, not complaining all the time, trying to change yourself before you change the world. And that did fly in the face of the kind of punk ethos that a lot of people, the whole kind of like live fast, die young, do a lot of drugs. And so when we came out and we were younger and we were so outspoken, a lot of older people in the scene didn't like it. So what ended up happening was Youth of Today just sort of created a new kind of community. I think there was a lot of kids, especially younger kids in the scene at the time, that weren't a bunch of tough guys. They didn't want to go out and get drunk and get in fights and, sleep on park benches and, things like that. They were just, regular whatever kids. And I think they found an alternative to that in Youth Today. So a lot of kids went straight edge. A lot of bands started like Gorilla Biscuits, Bold and bands like that. And so a straight edge scene kind of really grew out in New York City. And it was amazing. Like, it was, Youth Today could play CBGB's and they packed that place with like 800 kids. And so that sort of became a community that was centered around straight edge and vegetarianism and positive living. And that actually kind of spilled out, once Youth Today started going on tour, that spilled out into other cities. And, when other bands like Uniform Choice started on the West Coast, it became like a whole scene. And it was kind of nice because within this punk scene, you had a little bubble of positivity that was the straight edge scene. And, it was kind of a really cool grassroots movement that we were part of.
I don't want to sound like Greg Graffin from Bad Religion, talking through title of the songs, but you said that straight edge movement wasn't living a big moment when you started out the Youth of Today project. So it's been a straight edge revenge.
Pretty much. We were so much into revenge. We were into clean living and, being cool with other people, and, and I think people gravitated towards that. People wanted a little, the punk scene was very dark. Once you start getting into like drugs and crack and heroin and speed and meth and, PCP and all, those things that people were doing, things can get dark real fast. And, along with drugs, what follows in drugs wake? Fighting, violence. There was a lot of that in the scene. And I think people liked the music. They were inspired by the music. They liked the energy of the music, but they weren't into that whole, negative lifestyle that was like a real downward spiral. And, so an alternative came out of that where people were latching onto, something that was a little bit higher. And so, even without even knowing it, I think that was kind of like, that was the beginning of my spiritual path, because I didn't want like negative. I knew even before I got into spirituality, I started chanting, anything like that. I knew a few things in my life just as a 17, 18-year-old kid. I knew that, being materialistic wasn't going to make you happy. And happiness doesn't come from your bank balance or the car that you drive or the clothes that you wear. And I also knew that, drugs, drinking, negative thinking, these are also going to drag you down. So I wanted sort of a cleaner lifestyle. And I think that kind of like anti-materialistic mindset mixed with a kind of like straight edge positivity, it kind of set me up for spirituality. I think that's kind of like the beginning of spirituality.
This leads us to the 1991. So more than 30 years after that particular year, that particular moment, there's still a huge need for this positivity. And especially now, right after everything that happened through 2020 and 2021, younger generations probably need to have this kind of witness from people like you, from characters like you, or all the other pioneers of this era. Can we say that positivity could be a brand new way to approach to 2022, for example?
Yeah, it just depends on what your positivity is. I'm not into sticking your head in the sand. I'm not into that kind of positivity where there's a lot of real problems in the world, and I'm just going to kind of ignore them, and I'm going to try to stay cheery and positive over here. That's not what I'm into, and that's not really what spirituality is about. When I talk about positivity, I mean trying to change your life and trying to mold your life and define your life where you are trying to avoid the activities. In Krishna consciousness, they're called, there's modes of nature. So there's sattva, there's the mode of goodness, and the mode of goodness is where things are more natural. You eat more natural foods. Life is a little bit slower. You're not so concerned about money and materialism, but you're more concerned about quality of life, relationships, relationship with divinity, peacefulness, contentment, and that life brings about a sense of happiness. Now, the next mode that you have is the mode of passion, which is Rajaguna. So the mode of passion is defined by incessant desires. Like, I'm not happy right now. I need to go out and get stuff to be happy. And it creates a kind of like a fire for materialism where you feel a little emptiness in your heart, and you think you're going to fill that void in your heart by going out and getting things, whether it's cars, clothes, sneakers, records, and even more subtle than that, you're thinking you're going to get power, influence, fame, distinction over other people. But it doesn't work. It's funny too, because we can see across the board that it doesn't work. Because, if you have spiritually bankrupt people, you can give them millions of dollars and they're still not going to be happy. I mean, we've seen examples of that. Look at Kurt Cobain, the richest, most famous, rock star in the world, ended up killing himself because he was so depressed. So, those two don't equate each other. Having things, the things of this world, because you could still be empty inside, and no amount of things is going to satisfy that kind of yearning of the heart. So that's Rajaguna. And then you have Tamaguna, which is the mode of ignorance or the mode of darkness. That's things like intoxication, staying out late at night, violence, helplessness, depression. So, we can see that, you can kind of choose how you want to build your life in these three modes of nature. And if you live in the mode of ignorance, where things are unorganized, unclean, you stay up late, you have no regulation, you eat unhealthy foods, you sit on the couch, you eat a bag of potato chips, you lounge around, you watch a lot of TV, you do a lot of drugs, you get drunk a lot. That type of lifestyle, it doesn't even make you happy. That kind of like darkness, like the stuff that we saw originally in the punk scene, that stuff just makes you more and more unhappy. And even the mode of passion, where you think like, I'm not feeling complete, I need to go out and get the things of this world, that kind of like rat race, you could say, for money and for power and for, status and society, that also doesn't make you happy. That's not to say that money's evil. Money's just an energy of Krishna, and you can use money for a lot of good things, but money just for its own sake, just to kind of collect money because you want to buy the things of this world thinking that's going to make you feel complete. That's also you can see, you can just look around this world, it's a failure. So really really what you have to do is, to solve that problem that we all come into, having like an empty heart. That's internal work. That no amount of things outside of you is going to solve that problem. What that means is that you have to start going inside, understanding who you are as spirit, and understanding what is actually going to fulfill me in my heart. And it's an interesting story. One time I went to, the very first time I went to India, I was like in my early 20s. I barely knew anything about spirituality or Vaishnavism or Eastern spirituality or Krishna consciousness. I basically moved into a temple. A few months later, I joined Shelter. A few months after that, I went to India for the first time. So I wasn't even like into this stuff I was into this stuff for maybe like 8 months, and I knew practically nothing about it. And then I just moved right into a temple. So I was basically, starting from square one. And so I went to India for the first time, and I was in Vrindavan, this holy city in India. It's called the land of Krishna. And I was at this river called the Yamuna River, which is famous because Krishna had so many pastimes in the Yamuna River. So it's considered one of the most sacred rivers in India. And me and a few people were chanting. We were doing kirtan. And I just had a pair of kartals, and we were chanting Hare Krishna. And this sadhu walked over to us. And he asked us, the first thing he asked us was, "Where are you from?" And I was even surprised that he spoke English, because here's a sadhu with like, beard, and he looked like a, wandering mendicant, some like you'd see on like a movie out of India or something, long robes. And so he said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from New York." And he said, "New York? What are you doing here in Vrindavan?" And I said, "I want to learn about Krishna." That's pretty much exactly what I said to him. I want to learn about Krishna. And when I said that, he started to cry. Like tears literally started to run down his cheek, and he started to cry. And he kept on saying, "You've come so far. You've come so far." Like he was really touched. And here was these like young kids from New York City, and they, got on a plane, they traveled so far, they went, through so much expense and trouble and travel, had come to this holy place of Vrindavan to learn about Krishna. And so once he saw that, he recognized some sincerity in us, and he said, "Okay, I'm going to tell you 3 things about chanting. And if you can do these 3 things, it will make your chanting into a very deep meditation." So the first thing that he said, I'm really going to focus on the third thing that he said. But the first thing that he said you should always listen, because the sound vibration itself is very powerful, and sound vibration can change your consciousness. So he said, when you're not chanting, when the singer's chanting, you should listen very intensely to the mantra. And then he said, number 2, you should always chant back. Some people are shy and they're in a kirtan, they may not chant, or they may think they have a bad singing voice or something. He said, it's not about that. He said, it's not about the quality of your voice, it's about the quality of your heart. And when you're expressing your heart through song to Krishna and calling out to Krishna to have Krishna come into your life, it's a very powerful experience. So don't sit on the sidelines, always chant back when you're in kirtan. But then this was the thing that really struck me. He said, the third thing I'm going to tell you is the most secret of all secrets. And when he said that, like, I really felt like, whoa, I'm going to learn something that's like really confidential knowledge about spirituality. So I was like, wow. And so he kind of it was funny too, because we were sitting on the ground and he was standing above us. And he even kind of leaned in, like he was going to tell us a secret. Like he kind of looked around. I'm going to tell you guys the most secret thing about spirituality. And he kind of looked around and he leaned in and he sort of whispered to us. And this is important. This is important. He said, and then he said it very low. He said, when you chant, he said, do it with a longing in your heart. He kind of pounded his heart like that. And then he said this. He said, we are all born, every single person, every single being is born into the material world feeling incomplete, feeling like there's something in my life that's missing. And he said, so we all are kind of born in this world with this hole in our hearts. And we try to fill it with so many things. We try to fill it with money. We try to fill it with sex. We try to fill it with prestige and fame and followers and, whatever anybody's knocking themselves out, to get in the material world. He said, but none of that will fulfill your heart. He said, the only thing that fulfills a person's heart is love. And he said, the ultimate object of our love is Krishna, who is the source of all love. So he said, we are looking, he goes, first of all, we're looking for the wrong thing. And he said, second of all, we're looking in the wrong place. Well, what we really want is we really want love. And the way that you can find love in the highest, most pure, unconditional form is that love of God. And he said, when you get that love of God in your life, and you get that light of Krishna in your life, these other things like money and fame and power, they just don't become so important to you anymore. And once that kind of like light and love of Krishna enters your heart, you just want to share that with everybody that you see. And then he kind of left, and I never saw him again. But here it is, 30 years later, and I can still remember like practically word for word what he said to me, because it really rang so true to me. Especially, when I was a kid, I was trying to figure out what is life all about and what's going to make me happy. I'm looking at my parents, they're rich, but they're miserable. Like, what can I do in this life that's going to kind of make me feel happy and fulfilled? And I was really sort of searching for that. And, I think that's what really led me to, getting into Krishna and getting into, things from the East, because they seem to have a handle on it that, the religion that I grew up in kind of like left me wondering with. It's it's really kind of powerful, and it's true, and it's something that you can experience for yourself. And so, yeah, it was a really enlightening conversation with that sadhu.
This is a very beautiful story, and I'm glad you decided to share it with us. So for some kind of reason, you kind of drove the fast lane for like getting into the temple, getting into shelter, and getting to India. But what was like coming back to the Western civilization world after that meeting, after those talkings?
Well, it was pretty interesting because, I flew into New York, and in India, I was learning all about the culture of yoga and the culture of spirituality. And in India, and especially in Vrindavan, everybody calls each other Prabhu. Like, say Prabhu, instead of saying, hey, bro, what's up, dude? Everybody says Prabhu, they address each other that way. And Prabhu means master. And so it's ingrained in the very culture, weaving in humility with your consciousness. Because humility is so important in spirituality, because humility means, material life means you want to be at the center, you want to be the enjoyer of everything, you want people to orbit around you and kind of serve you and bring things to you and validate you. But spirituality is the exact opposite. Spirituality means you want to take yourself out of the center, and you want to put Krishna in the center, and you want to put other people in the center, and you want to serve Krishna, you want to serve others. And so that takes a good, healthy dose of humility. And so woven within the culture is, this symbol of humility. Prabhu, my master, can I do anything to you? You address everybody at that. You start to see other people as not what can I get from that other person, but what can I give to that other person? And so, I was in India for I think the first time we went, we stayed for a long time. We stayed for at least 2 months. And I think it was even longer than 2 months. I think it was 3 months we were there. And so I got back to the airport, and everybody was calling each other. It was big at that time in American culture, was to call everybody dog. Yo, what's up, dog? Yo, my dog. What's up, dog? And I was like, wow, I just came from a place where you call everybody master to a place where you call everybody dog. I was in a bit of culture shock. But it is true that I did take the fast track. I really just kind of jumped into it, and I left everything behind, and I moved into an ashram, and I lived in temples for years, and I went to India many times. And part of my service was doing shelter, which was spreading what we knew about Krishna. So in that sense, I felt a little protected from the material world. Even though I was in America, I was still living in a temple where that culture, at least in our little building, was still going on. So that was nice.
And I guess that this is what shelter it's really about, because you cover up from the outside world, because it's a real shelter, not only the band. Was hard for you to kind of match between the fact that you were a worldwide touring band with several different projects, and you have to deal with all the things that you learn from Krishna conscience, like humility and stuff like that. At the same time, you were traveling the world with music.
It's a trip. Because, when you get on stage, people practically worship you. You know what I mean? There's fans of the band. You're on the stage. They're down there. It's if you're not careful, it can turn into a real God trip. I'm, this powerful, famous person. Look, I'm creating this music, and everybody's singing along. And I think that's why people actually become musicians in the first place, because nothing will feed your false ego like being in a famous band. I wasn't famous. I can only imagine what a trip it must be to be in some huge band where you can't even walk down the street, or be some huge celebrity. It's got to mess with your mind, because our actual position in reality is that we're small. I'm one person amongst billions and trillions of people on one planet that's amongst billions of planets, amongst billions of universes. If you just look in the grand scheme of things and you zoom out, we're very small. It's not that we're insignificant. We're significant because we have this relationship with divinity, and Krishna loves us, and Krishna and Krishna kind of wants that love from every single person, because every single person is so unique that there's a flavor of love that you can offer Krishna and that you can offer to other people, that nobody else has that particular flavor of love and service that you can offer. So although we're small, we're not insignificant, because we can give this certain thumbprint of love to Krishna and others that nobody else can give. But in reality, we're very, very small. We're not big. So when people start to look at you like you're big, and they start to build you up on this pedestal that you're a big deal, and people treat you in that light. And even though we were just, a hardcore band or whatever, there would be people that would treat us in that light. They would treat us like we were a big deal. And if you're not careful, and if you don't have, if you're not practiced in spiritual philosophy, where you kind of understand that if I let this go to my head, if I let this feed my false ego, it's going to have a bad effect on me. It's going to feed my false ego instead of getting me out of my false ego. What happens is it sets you up for a huge fall, because today's star is tomorrow's washed up loser. And your band may be popular today, just like, Limp Bizkit were popular, and now Fred Durst walks down the street and like everybody thinks what a joke this guy is. You know what I mean? So if you start thinking that you're a big deal, you're setting yourself up for a big fall. And a lot of people that were once celebrities and now their time goes by and they're no big deal anymore. It makes people become depressed, people become suicidal. And so you got to be careful, like, especially even us as Shelter, like we were in a band and we had to constantly remind ourselves that I'm doing this as a service. I'm not doing this to usurp Krishna's position as like God. And when I'm on that stage and people are cheering and you finish a song and everybody's clapping, I would always just, even before we went on stage, we would kind of all huddle together and we would say some prayer. Even to this day, which place, before we go on stage, we all get together, we say a bunch of mantras, we chant a bunch of prayers, and we try to really sincerely, get in that mindset that, what, we're just servants. And if we had, Krishna's given us so much in our life, and if we can kind of spread that message to other people, fantastic. It's done so much good for my life. It's brought so much light into my life. And these things are just kind of universal truths that anybody can apply to their life and get a good result. So, we're just out there, we're spreading this message. And, truthfully, any kind of talent that I have, whether it's playing music or like whatever, at yoga or whatever, that's like a God-given talent anyway. You know what I mean? I mean, I can practice yoga, I can practice guitar. But really that, like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, I'm the ability in man. And it's so true, even though I don't even know what drew me to a guitar anyway. I was just a kid and I liked music and I felt drawn to it. That kind of like, that's Krishna in your heart telling you, do this. Why did I play guitar and not cello? Sometimes, somehow or other, Krishna's, directed me towards a guitar. So I always have to remember that even my own talents and abilities are God-given. So, we always try to do it in that mood of, just trying to give back, actually. So we've had so many great teachers in our lives that, gave us so much that if we have any kind of like influence over other people, let's try to give them something of substance. And it is trip. And you do have to remind yourself of that. And even if you're in a Krishna core band, it's easy to get carried away with all that, fame and accolades and people cheering for you. And, it's meditation. It's hard internal work. And that's what spirituality is all about.
You were talking a few moments ago about like great celebrities like Kurt Cobain, but lately, also like in the last decade, we had unfortunately examples like Chris Cornell or Chester Bennington, people that probably missed something through their own internal work. Like you said, they were probably missing something. I met both of them, and I saw something missing in their eyes. Even if they were like super polite people with me as a journalist or something like that, it's still that feeling. Something was missing, even if we're like worldwide superheroes.
I had the same feeling. I had, that's what really pushed me into spirituality, because, in my own world, in like the hardcore scene, I was like a little bit of a celebrity. And, I was just, I remember being 21 years old and thinking, I don't get it. I have everything that I ever wanted. Because when I was a kid, all I wanted to do, I was obsessed with music from the time I was like 5, 6 years old, obsessed with it. All I wanted to do was be in a band, play music, get, have that band become popular, be able to make a living off of music. And, I was doing it. And I had a certain sense of popularity. I could walk down the street and there'd be hardcore kids and they'd be like, oh crap, it's Porcell, oh my God. I would get that every now and then. And I couldn't quite figure it out. Like I had this dream of being in a band, of being a musician. I fulfilled that dream. I was making money. I had a nice lifestyle. I was actually living in California, living at the beach. And I was just like, and I could just feel it. Like there is something missing. And I couldn't quite figure out what it was. But, I can imagine, big rock stars like that, like, the singer for Linkin Park and the singer for Soundgarden. They must feel that 100 times because they're rich beyond their wildest dreams. They never have to work again in their life. They walk down the street, people are asking them for their autograph, but I tell you, it's empty. There's something empty about it, and you feel that. And I think probably to the greater degree that you have that, there's always going to be that hole in the heart, because those things, they don't fill that hole in the heart. There's only one thing that fills that hole in the heart. That's Krishna. That's God. We're all have this great, we're all parts of God. We have this connection with God, but we've forgotten it. And we'll try to fill that hole with so many things, but it's palpable. You can feel it even if you have all of your things that you set out to have. You're gonna feel that little bit of existential crisis where you're like, man, what is the point of life, and what's the meaning of it all, and what am I doing, and how come I don't feel fulfilled? It's true. And what's really cool, what was really cool that I thought was, I got all my wishes fulfilled, all my dreams fulfilled at a young age. And I realized this isn't going to fulfill me. Most people go through life and they don't get that. And so it's like a carrot on a stick. You ever see that if you want to get a donkey to walk forward? You ride on the donkey, you have a stick and put a carrot in front of him. And the donkey's always walking to get that carrot, but he never gets it. So most people are like that. Most people are like, I want fame. I want this. I want, money. And, they spend their whole life trying to get that. And they think, if I can get it, then I'm going to be happy. But they don't get it. So they just think, if I can just strive more and get it, then I'll be happy. If I can be rich, I'll be happy. If I can have this, I'll be happy. If I can have the big house, I'll be happy. And they'll waste their whole life searching for those things. So I felt quite fortunate that I kind of was put in a situation where my dreams came true at a very young age, and I realized that they weren't what they were cracked up to be. And it really, it got to the point where I was like, I have everything that I want materially, and I'm not happy. The only thing that I don't have is spirituality. And I thought, let me at least try that. And so that was really my start of my journey towards Krishna.
So we got a question that might sound simple and common, but at the same time, it's pretty important. Like, how would you explain Krishna's love to a person who is totally against all religion and spirituality?
How would you explain Krishna's love to a person who is totally against all religion and spirituality? I would try to frame it, in the context of materialism, because if you're not searching for, if you don't think that spirituality is going to make you happy, then I would be like, well, what do you think is going to make you happy? Like, is it going to be the car? Is it going to be, what is it that you think is going to make you happy? Is it going to be, most people think, if I can get a certain amount of beauty, if I can get a certain amount of this, but all those things, because they're material, they're, the material world is constantly shifting. It's nothing ever stays the same. So even if you get the beauty, guess what? You're going to get old and you're going to lose the beauty. Money comes and money goes. Sometimes you have a big bank account, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're in the most popular band in the world, and sometimes you're Fred Durst walking down the street and people think you're a total loser. And how could anybody like Limp Bizkit? They were like the lamest band. But at one time, he was a huge rock star. So all those things, they get taken away. So if you just take a cold, hard look at how the material world works, there's nothing you can really grab onto, because it's always kind of like shifting. It's like sand through your fingers. And anything that you want is going to be taken away from you. Even your own material body, you're going to get old, you're going to die. And so sometimes if people aren't into spirituality, if you can kind of get them to at least see the problems of the material world, sometimes people can be like, yeah, that is problematic. Maybe there is something transcendental to that. So it really kind of depends on the person and where the person is. Everything's very individual, but I would at least maybe start there.
That's great. So before we say goodbye,
another thing that I would try to say is, I grew up with religion. I was raised Catholic, and it didn't really strike a chord in me at all. Like, I would go to church, I'd be so bored. There'd be like a bunch of hymns saying, I didn't know what any of them meant. Kneel down, sit down, get up, shove this wafer in your mouth. It didn't really it didn't make any sense to me. And I didn't have any kind of like deep spiritual experiences from it. And so I think people like that, they get kind of like a mundane exposure to religion, and they kind of like look at religion as kind of like a sectarian thing, that these people are into this and they hate these people, and the Muslims are against the Jews, against the Christians and all that. So I get it. I had a bad taste in my mouth about spirituality, when I was growing up. So I would maybe try to impress upon that person that that's not true spirituality. That's sectarianism. And real spirituality is something that's very, very inclusive, and something that's very experiential. Like, you can experience it in your own life. And I think when people start to see spirituality as something universal, and when they start to follow certain dharmic principles where they avoid things that are going to bring up their lower nature, and they start to gravitate towards things, and even food and situations and community, that are going to uplift them to a higher place. If they live like that for 6 months, they're gonna get a good result from that, and they're going to feel themselves, they're going to feel a little relief, from what the material world has to offer. So I always try to encourage people to think of spirituality as something that's non-sectarian, something that's universal, and something that you can apply to your life and get a good result.
that's great. Usually at this moment, when interviews comes to an end, you ask people. I usually ask people, okay, what's the next plans, next tours, and stuff like that. But in this situation, I want to ask you what you wanna achieve within the next years, maybe through music or in your life experience.
Well, I'm just gonna hopefully write a new record. I'm working on some music. I'm working on some new music, a new band. I also want to do some new Judge songs too, but I really would like to do a new Shelter record too. So hopefully we can get that together to at least write maybe an EP or maybe a whole album. And we're actually going to start touring again in December. So probably by next year we'll start playing again, and hopefully we'll make it to Italy soon. Love Italy. So we'll see. It's sort of the world is just starting to open up now, so it's still kind of it's still hard to tell what the timeline is going to be, but new music in the future, hopefully.
How much new music and actually producing a new record could be part of your personal growth as a human being?
Yeah, it's always, what's really cool about records, I think, is records give you a little snapshot into where those people who are in the band were at a certain period in their life. Like, you look at it like Youth Today Break Down the Walls. That was like me when I was 18, Roggenroth was 19. We were completely into straight edge. We had this kind of fervor that we were going to go out and change the scene, and change the world, and make a change. And you know, that really, that time in our life and that consciousness of our life, it really is represented on that record. And you know, so records are like that. And so I think it would be really interesting, you know, now that we're older, you know, hopefully we're a little more mature in spiritual life. I think it would be really interesting to see what that snapshot of our life is now, encased in music. And you know, I'd like to at least just do one more record. You know, we're all getting older. Who knows when we're going to die? You know, so at least we can do sort of like a swan song record. And I think it would be interesting.
Okay. So Paramananda, thank you so much for your time and for your words. This is like pure disclosure for like good feelings and positivity. So thanks again to you and to Devarishi for helping me out to do this beautiful interview. Hope to see you again sooner or later in Italy. It will be a pleasure to meet up.
All right. One last thing that I'd like to say is, you know, when I was in shelter, you know, back in the early days when we were doing like Attaining the Supreme record, I did a fanzine that was called War on Illusion. And so End Hits Records is going to redo that fanzine as a book, and there's going to be extra interviews and extra pictures and stuff like that, and you know, forward. So that's going to be out pretty soon too. So look out for that on End Hits Records. My old fanzine, War on Illusion. It's all about Krishna. It's all about, you know, being a punk rocker and trying to, you know, navigate the hardcore scene and also navigate spirituality. And so there's a lot of good interviews and stuff like that in it too. So I'm psyched to see that. It's going to be resurrected pretty soon.
I'm gonna definitely check them out. And again, thank you so much for your time. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
All right, brother. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Bye. Wow. Dharma, è stato bellissimo, quante cose meravigliose ha voluto condividere con noi, è stato veramente un piacere, bisognava prendere appunti praticamente ad ogni frase, e questo forse è il bello di fare questo tipo di incontri. Quindi innanzitutto io ringrazio te e ringrazio House of Devarishi per questa opportunità, spero che non sia l'ultimo perché sono incontri terribilmente nutrienti.
Introduzione all'inizio, e come detto, Paramananda, Raghunath sono persone davvero incredibili, particolari, sono dei leader, e come ho detto nella precedente puntata, se ti ricordi, hanno davvero aperto la mente e gli occhi di tantissime persone in giro per il mondo, ragazzi e ragazze che avevano davvero necessità di una o più risposte sul senso della vita e via di seguito. E quindi, come hai detto tu, sarei ripetitivo, ma sono persone davvero in gamba, speciali, davvero speciali. Condivido appieno quello che hai detto poc'anzi. Spero che l'intervista sia stata davvero ispirante per gli ascoltatori, insomma, ecco. Questo è la cosa che più mi preme, insomma.
Io invito tutti coloro che ci hanno seguito, eventualmente se ci fossero domande, richieste, eccetera, non solo House of Devarishi è una realtà importante, ma anche noi come singoli eventualmente possiamo anche trarre ispirazione per quelle che saranno eventualmente le prossime dirette, proprio a seconda di quelle che saranno le domande, le questioni che si vorranno affrontare. Grazie a tutti per averci seguito, ancora grazie mille Dharma Vidas per questo importante contatto, ci vediamo alla prossima qui sul canale, è il caso di dirlo. Haribol.
Haribol, grazie a tutti, alla prossima. Hare Krishna.
Ciao.